want to tell you quickly, I was in the Oval Office with George W. Bush the day that Obama, the candidate, this is before he was even the nominee, was saying that he was going to fly jets into Pakistan, which I thought was crazy talk. And he said, we'll fly jets into Pakistan if that's what we have to do. We'll get him. And Bush said something which I thought was one of the most frightening things a president could ever say to a citizen. And that is, you know what? You don't have to worry about that, because when he gets into this office, he'll realize that the president's hands are really tied and there's not a lot of options and you just have to do what you have to do. And he won't do that. But go in and get him. If he's in Pakistan, sure, we'd go in and get him. Well, that's what President Obama did. And he didn't fly jets, but he considered it. Now, the question is, what does this mean? Everybody's celebrating. Let's not be stupid. He was an idea, not a leader. He was an idea, and the idea lives on. Michael Scheuer is here. He's a guy who has had a falling out with just about everybody because he's a guy who, under Clinton, said, get him, and nobody would. And after 9/11, he left and said, they're not serious about it. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm glad to be here.
Good day for you or bad day for you?
Oh, I think it's a very good day in terms of getting rid of someone who is worthy of death.
Yeah.
And also who was a very effective enemy of the United States. So I think from that perspective, it's a good day. I'm afraid a lot of people are going to confuse a victory with winning the war, though.
Well, I will tell you this. I had somebody today say to me, well, then why are we going to be in Afghanistan anymore? Doesn't this mean, what does victory look like at this point?
Well, victory is lost in Afghanistan, Glenn. The president has basically surrendered. We don't have enough troops there to do much of anything against the Taliban. So that is almost a foregone conclusion. What it means is, I have to tell you that because we're not going to commit enough forces to really win the war by destroying what's left of al-Qaeda and the Taliban, I think we should get out. But at the same time, when we do get out, they will have defeated the second superpower after defeating the Soviets, and it will be a tremendous galvanizing event in the Muslim world.
Let me ask you this, Michael, and this is the reason why I would never run for president. I would make a bad president, and nobody would ever want me as president. But I think that there is such a strain on our military. I think Libya is about to suck us into. I think we'll see ground troops within a year, in the Middle East. I think this whole thing is it's going to be a nightmare. I really feel like we should pull our troops back from all of these places and restore ourselves, because we are being set up and we're following along with it.
Yeah, I entirely agree with that, Glenn. We are. There's never been a slippery slope in Libya. It's been a straight line. Air power wins nothing. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to put combat troops on if your goal is removing Gaddafi.
I read a story in the Iranian Press TV. Are you familiar with Press TV?
I am familiar with it, yes.
Okay. They're reporting, and tell me how credible you think this is. They're reporting that the Russians are saying that that Obama lied to the UN and said, well, this is just air power, and that's not what's happening. And Russia, and this report says Russia and China are readying ground troops to protect their assets in Libya, and they're pissed at America. Do you think that's true?
I don't think they would risk putting troops on the ground, Glenn, but I think in fact, the Russians and Chinese probably don't have much room to call anybody liars. But
yeah, no.
The truth of the matter is the president has boxed himself into a corner here. He can't win without Western combat forces, and that's
crazy.
The direction we're headed in. I hope he has enough gumption just to say the game isn't worth the candle, but they'll start this nonsense about genocide and the rest of it. So we may well end up with troops there, but I think it would have to be before a year. I don't think the resistance can resist for a year without us.
Michael, what do you expect to happen in Pakistan? I read a report this morning where the television anchors are split. Some of them are saying Pakistan better explain itself. In Pakistan, better explain itself, because how did we let this guy live so close to the Capitol without knowing it? And the others are saying, get America, and we've got to dedicate ourselves now to destroy the infidel.
Yeah, I think, Glenn, that's exactly the problem in Pakistan at the moment, is that our interests and their interests don't mesh at all, and they never have. It's only the two presidents, Mr. Bush and then Mr. Obama, who have wanted to believe that the Pakistanis have the same interests that we do. Nothing could be further from the truth. And, I think probably someone in the intelligence service or the military or both knew where Osama was in Abbottabad and didn't want to be responsible for killing him, because for more than half of the people in Afghanistan, Osama Bin Laden is both a religious and a military hero. And so I would think that the Pakistanis are going to end up with at least a significant amount of domestic violence in their country because of this.
Michael, you and I think, disagree on a number of points, but I like your attitude. If I were somebody fighting a war, I would want you by my side, because you at least speak the truth as you see it, and you're cut and dry. And war is cut and dry, and it's hell.
It's about killing, Glenn.
Right, I know that, and I appreciate that. And go ahead.
The president doesn't seem to know it. He
did on this one.
No, he got up on his horse. Well, Mr. Bush too, in this sense at least. Both of them saying we're not at war with Islam. Well, that can be true from our perspective, but it's very clear that a large portion of Islam is at war with us.
Right.
And if we don't take that seriously, we will lose.
So do you think that we actually washed this man's body and then dumped him into the sea in a proper way? Or, I would have put him in a Spam can myself.
Well, I think this is a pretty politically correct government, both of them, and I think they probably did the right thing. I don't see any point in aggravating people further than they are.
Sure, yeah.
By abusing the body.
I get that, but we live in a conspiratorial world. Geez, don't dump the body. Put it next in, put them on ice next to Disney.
Yeah, it's going to be an enormous problem, I think. Though I think they were trying to do the right thing, but the conspiracy guys are going to drive you crazy now.
All right. So, Michael, what I wanted to ask you is, I sense a giant setup coming. I think that what's happening in the Middle East is so badly handled at best, orchestrated at worst, and it is really to move towards a Palestinian state, et cetera, and I think that there's a nightmare coming between Turkey and Iran and Egypt and all of this nightmare with Libya, and the Israelis are in trouble. I do not agree with putting any more military boots. I want the boots off the ground and back here at home. But would you agree that Israel has a right to defend itself?
I've always argued that, absolutely. I think the Israelis or any other country have the right to defend themselves. I just think that it's a nonsense to argue that any state has a right to exist, Glenn. You and I here in America don't have a right to exist if we can't maintain our society and our economy and our defensive forces.
I understand that, but they have a right to defend themselves.
Absolutely.
In the way we would have a right to exist if we can defend ourselves.
That's right.
Everybody's trying to knock us off the block. You're right. We don't have a right to exist if we can't sustain it.
That's correct.
Correct. So I agree with that. I guess that's why I phrased it unknowingly, that it is a right to defend themselves.
Absolutely.
Do you believe they're being set up?
Well, I think they're facing enemies that are intractable, and I think probably because we have intervened so much between them and the Palestinians that we prevented the Israelis from taking care of the Palestinian problem 15 years ago. The question for me always is, why are we involved in somebody else's religious war?
How would they take care of the Palestinian?
Well, I think 15 or 20 years ago they could have taken care of them very easily with military force and shoving them into Jordan. But of course, the peacemongers that there's never any real peace really intervened every time the Israelis were about to win.
How concerned are you about the United Nations with this responsibility to protect nonsense?
I think it's something that we should be shed of immediately, Glenn. The founders of the UN, and I carry no brief for the UN, but the founders never intended it to be an organization which destroys its member states, which is done in Libya, which it's done in Egypt and Tunisia, which it will try to do in Syria. So I've always been of the view that America has no business in the UN.
You were the head of the Osama Bin Laden desk. You were the guy who was the main guy.
Yes.
How long have we known where Osama Bin Laden was?
I really don't think they had a clue after 9/11. After we let them get away out of Tora Bora, until they began to piece this puzzle together down in Abbottabad, and which finally led to his killing.
So you believe that it did happen in, like the White House is saying, I think in February they started to see this.
I think that's right, Glenn. I think that the problem we had was the Hollywood version that was given to us by the politicians about running from rock to rock and cave to cave was just that, the Hollywood version. Because if they're moving, they make mistakes, they set up travel patterns, and they're easier to kill. I think bin Laden has been pretty sedentary since 9/11. Certainly when I was chasing him in 96 to 99, he lived a very predictable life, and that's why Mr. Clinton had so many chances to kill him and didn't do it. But you're much more at risk if you're moving around all the time.
Did we do the right thing by killing him the way we did, or should the Pakistanis have done it? Or
well, the Pakistanis were never going to do it, Glenn. We have to, in my mind at least, we have to grow up. The Cold War is over. No one is going to be our proxy and do our dirty work. We have created a situation where the Pakistanis have helped us a little and took our money, and now they have a civil war that threatens the stability of their country. We've pumped billions into President Saleh down in Yemen, and eventually that's still going to be a problem we have to take care of.
You're back in the Oval Office today, let's say, and the president says, okay, Michael, what do we do and what do we look for? What's going to happen next and what do we do?
I think the immediate threat is from people who are enraged among that portion of the Muslim world that's at war with us. And I would think that Westerners, expatriates, businessmen, tourists, I don't know how many attacks, whether it's a few, or very many, but some will occur. I think it would probably be Pollyannish not to believe it. And I think we're likely to see some attacks in our own country by these kind of angry individuals.
Michael Scheuer, always good to talk to you. We'll talk again.
Thank you, sir. I look forward to it.
You bet. Bye-bye. Strange relationship with Michael Scheuer, because there are many things that I disagree with him on. But like I said, he's one of the only guys that will actually tell you the truth as he understands it. I mean, would you say it's fair to say, Stu, we can count those people on one hand?
Oh, yeah. It's very rare. And even though a lot of the stuff he says, you're right, I don't agree with, but he just says it, and he doesn't care.
And he doesn't care,
Yeah.
and you respect that. You can at least walk away from a conversation with that guy and go, you know what? Well, I mean, we do. Whenever something is going on in the world, we can talk to all kinds of, we can talk to generals and everything else, and that have great knowledge, but they don't necessarily say what they're really thinking. They're still kind of calculating because they don't want to this or that. Michael doesn't care. He's just pissed everybody off and he doesn't care. And it's refreshing and important that you have those kinds of conversations.
Glenn Beck.
Osama Bin Laden is dead. He was shot in the head. The mission was to kill, not to capture Osama Bin Laden. Crowds gathered last night at the White House, Ground Zero, to celebrate. S.E. Cupp will be at Ground Zero here in just a little while. We'll talk to her at Ground Zero and see what the mood is here in Lower Manhattan. Barack Obama said last night, boy, I haven't had problems with this now that this guy's back in my head.
Yeah, no, I was wondering, at some point, someone on television or radio today will really blow one of the Obama, the order of them,
Whatever.
and there will be some terrible audio coming tomorrow. You know it's happening. Someone out there is going to come close to ruining their career doing that today. You know it's on the way, and we'll have the audio for you tomorrow.
U.S. carried out an operation, Barack Obama said last night, at my direction. I thought he was a little less than gracious, so shall we say. But it was a good speech and a good move on his part. W said, no matter how long it takes, justice will be done. By the way, they're putting flowers and flags in front of his house today. Not Osama Bin Laden's, but George W. Bush's. The killings have ratcheted things up in the Arab world. There is heat in Pakistan. Hamas is condemning the killing of the holy warrior, as they called him. The White House is trying to figure out now whether or not they should release the photos of the body. I hope we have the body and didn't dump it in the sea. WikiLeaks is saying that Al-Qaeda is this is an old wire that came out that Al-Qaeda said they're going to unleash a nuclear hellstorm if Osama bin Laden is killed. That is from WikiLeaks. They said that they have a nuclear weapon and they've hidden it in Europe. And the chatter back and forth is that they're going to do something. This is before this was even known. The security here in New York has been tightened. The U.S. has told all worldwide travelers, be on the lookout. We had a biological response team in Japan. That has been recalled. And the U.S. is under a warning now from Department of Homeland Security that we are under threat. None of these things should be surprising. Let's go to Brad Thor now, who is a good friend with... Could be some of the people that actually were involved in this raid. Do you know yet, Brad, if you know any of the people involved?
I know that I was with a bunch of SEAL team guys over the weekend, and a couple of guys that were supposed to be there were not there. They had been called away. But, you know, with something like this, Glenn, we'll see. But the facts here is that they would have been training on this for a while. They didn't just put this together in, 48 hours. They mocked up an exact replica of this compound, probably somewhere in Afghanistan, and they've been hitting it every single way, running every kind of problem that could happen. So this didn't just happen overnight. They've been working on it since at least February.
Now I got an email from somebody who knows these things. And he said, and tell me what you think of this, because you just said the SEAL team that went in, and that's what's being reported. While it makes no difference to the story press is reporting SEALs did the op yesterday, it's not true. The military does not acknowledge the existence of Tier 1 assets, to include the SEALs Development Group.
You've nailed it right on the head. First, let's get something clear here. This was not just the SEALs. There may have been SEALs involved with this, but just to give you one example, the SEALs don't have indigenous air assets in Afghanistan. They can't get over the Hindu Kush over there. They would need Army MH-47 Chinooks to be able to fly that high and get over. They're going to need the Air Force to refuel them. You know, the best example I can give here is if your listeners, Glenn, want to picture what this thing looked like. Picture the movie Black Hawk Down, but successful, okay? That's what happened here. You dropped in at least 100 guys, okay? So you're going to have no fewer than 4 of these Chinook helicopters. You're going to set up a perimeter. You're going to go in. You're going to hit the objective. You're going to do bin Laden. But this is not like a group of 6 guys in that Charlie Sheen movie that went in and did bin Laden. This was a pretty intense operation.
An MH-47E, it's kind of a Chinook helicopter. It's an upgrade.
It's the Army's version of it. You'll remember that your good pal Marcus Luttrell, when they went in and tried to get Marcus out, that it was one of those helicopters. It might have been a different variant, but it was the MH-47 that actually took an RPG through the back and crashed against the side of the mountain and dropped into that ravine and killed a bunch of those were Army aviators from the 160th, the Night Stalkers, and there were SEALs on board. So
there are 26 of these helicopters, or that's how many were made by Boeing. They can't continue. They're just not getting them produced, and we're losing them. How much of an asset was that? That wasn't just a helicopter we left on the ground there.
Oh, it was millions and millions and millions of dollars that we blew in place, and that brings you back. You remember that in Black Hawk Down, how they blew that Black Hawk helicopter, and that's another thing. This was not a bunch of Black Hawk helicopters that flew over with the guys with all the equipment and everything and how heavy they are. You know, normally if you could, you would bring in a different variant, a real beefy, the 53 version of the Chinook to pick up the downed, the Chinook that landed heavy and couldn't fly again. But these guys didn't have the time, and they didn't want to waste any lives, and so they did what's called blowing it in place so that all the enemy's going to get is the charred remains of that helicopter.
Tell me about SEAL Team 6, because I thought SEAL Team 6 was one that kind of operates in the shadows and is...
Listen, there's been no official comment as to... This is, at some point, Glenn, we're going to hear the Marines were involved in this, too, because everybody wants a piece of this action, okay? So we know the Air Force had to...
in a way, everybody was.
And they should be.
Yeah.
Listen, it's the way it should be. This was not just, and the SEALs are fantastic, but listen, I'm already hearing that there were Delta Force guys on the ground there. They're also known as Combat Applications Group, the CAG guys. So
Tell me the difference. Can you rank them? I mean, who are the... CAG is the baddest of the bad, right?
Well, here's the thing, and this is not to be pejorative. If we can look at this in a sports terminology, your high school state champions would be like your Army Rangers, okay? Your top college athletes would be your Green Berets and your SEALs. And then you go to pro athletics and you go to the Pro Bowl. And that's where you have at the very top there, and this is where we get into what we call the black side, are the SEALs and the Delta Force guys. Now, SEAL Team 6, after a lot was written about it, changed their name to Naval Special Warfare Development Group, or DEV Group for short, so that the government could say, we don't know what you're talking about. Well, there is no SEAL Team 6. And it's the media that's pinned this SEAL Team 6 there. There's been nothing from the Pentagon, nothing from the White House.
So they haven't announced that this was SEAL Team 6?
No, this is just what's spun out in the media. There's nobody that said it's SEAL Team 6, and technically there is no SEAL Team 6.
Right.
It's not called
SEAL
that
Team
anymore.
SEAL Team 6. These are the guys that most likely, if I'm not saying they did this, but something like, do you remember when they downed all those UPS planes last summer?
Where they were trying to put all the printer cartridges on there with the...
Yeah, and they were saying, I was fascinated by that. They would show these devices, and they would call them bomb-like devices, but they weren't bombs. And I thought, who would do that? Oh, wait a minute. SEAL Team 6 might do something like that to test our defenses.
Well, it's interesting because Dick Marcinko, famous for his Rogue Warrior books and for drawing a lot of attention to SEAL Team 6, Dick was part of something called their Red Cell program. And red selling, you and I have talked about the red selling I've done with the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
The SEALs have done it for testing the integrity of military bases.
Correct.
So this is something that goes on a lot in the military and intelligence communities where we test ourselves. If we want to pose and have access to the same tools, and if we want to act like terrorists and think like terrorists, we should be testing ourselves to see where we're weak. And
so you're saying, wait a minute, are you saying that they don't test things, that are beyond military? Because that's what I would want them to do.
Oh, no, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. The power plants and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of cooperation that goes on even between the military and the private sector for doing that stuff.
Now, do you really believe that the guys who picked up Bin Laden gave him a nice little Muslim sponge bath and dressed him in his nice whites and then threw him in the water?
When I got done throwing up, when I heard that politically correct spin put out there, my thing is I think the guy's head should be put on a pike outside Ground Zero. I think we should show people how we treat our enemies and the fact that we would respect Muslim sensibilities. Yeah, I bet there's an order, Glenn. I bet that there was an order that this is what you have to do. I wouldn't be surprised, whether it was done or not. But by the way, last time I checked the map, there's really no oceans that close to Afghanistan. And, I mean, you're going to have to get on a plane. If they really did dump this guy, they wrap him in the sheet, they chain him up like Houdini, and they fly a C-130, I don't know, out over the Arabian Sea and open up the back door and kick him out. Here's one thing.
Still too good for him.
We'll start hearing over the next 6 months. This isn't the end of it today. I mean, I got to tell you, you got 100 guys there. Somebody snaps something with a camera phone. I mean, the key guy that'll write the book on this will be Mark Bowden, who wrote Black Hawk Down, Killing Pablo. He's the guy that has got those contacts in that community. They trust him. At some point, this story will come out. I hope Mark Bowden does it because he'll do a great job.
Oh, it'll be an amazing story. I just can't imagine that the cell phones weren't checked on something like this. I mean, this is somebody storming into Hitler's bunker. That's what this is. I mean, have you seen? We have them posted up at the Blaze. The pictures of the actual death site. I mean, this is where he was living, and
I was looking for the dialysis machine with a bullet through its head.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I didn't see
that either. I saw the blood on the floor, and that was taken. It's interesting. There's a lot of the story that we don't know, a lot of stuff that I think will eventually come out. There's been a lot of these great takedowns where, Uday and Kusei got, there was the 101st that got credit for it, and that was Delta Force. Pablo Escobar was done by Delta, but the Colombian forces got credit for it. You never hear Delta Force in the news. I love the SEALs, and I'm not saying the SEALs aren't some of the baddest mofos on the planet, but you never really hear anything about the Delta guys. They're quiet, and they're behind some of the biggest stuff. So I have no doubt Delta was there. We know the Air Force had to be involved for refueling with the Chinooks. So
SEALs, are you hearing what he's saying? He's saying you guys are pansies. That's what I heard. No.
They're bad.
That's what I heard. That's what the SEALs heard, and I think that's what America heard.
Nope. I'm saying it was a joint effort.
They're grappling down right in front of your back window right now.
They're roping onto the roof of my office building. But listen, this was military working at its best, working together. And like I said, we know Air Force was there. I know the Delta guys were there. The SEALs were there. And I'm sure the Marines had some very important role in this, and that's great. All those people. And I wish there was a way we could have gotten the Coast Guard there, too, because there are some fantastic men and women. It would have been great to let them have a piece of that action, but that doesn't fall within their scope.
All right, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Glenn.
Brad Thor, best-selling New York Times author.